I'm gonna kill your master and you won't get away either. Please teach us your martial arts!
Hey guys, it's Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society, and guess what? It's a Blu-ray review, and this is one I'm very excited about, and one that I've been threatening for a while, and it just took me a while to get through all the bonus features. So what is it? It is The Master, yes, 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 starring Jet Li. As you can see, there's multiple Jet Lis on the cover here. Also starring Yuen Wah, who's right here, who you'll recognize from a ton of movies. He was Bruce Lee's stunt double back in the day. He did a lot of movies with Sammo Hung, these Jackie Chan movies and stuff like that. Here we have Jerry Trimble, the man of probably the most amazing mullet you will ever see in the history of your life, as on display in this film. Crystal Kwok is also in this movie. It was directed by Li-Tsui Hark. And if you know anything about this movie, you'll probably know that it was shot in like '89 and not released until 1992. And I'll talk about that. I'm actually going to do a different video in which I talk about what it was like to revisit this movie, because I'm trying to keep the Blu-ray reviews a little bit shorter because they were getting a little bit unwieldy, but because I was talking about the film and the history of it on top of talking about the Blu-ray itself. So I'm going to talk about the packaging, I'm going to talk about the look of the film, and I'm going to talk about the bonus features. So just to talk about the look of the film, this is a 2K remaster, and it looks absolutely incredible. So Kung Fu Bob, actually, who did this artwork here, he does one of the commentary tracks on the Blu-ray here, and he talks about how, you know, for many years this was released on like a pan and scan VHS where like shots were cut in half and moved around and you couldn't see a lot of things in the frame, and it was also like not great picture quality. And so to have this on a Blu-ray like this that's been a 2K remaster that has the full aspect ratio and is like the full uncut version of the movie is really fantastic. It looks great and it's very, very clean. A lot of this, so this movie was shot in LA. If you know anything about LA, it's very bright here, right? We have a lot of sun, and a lot of this was shot outside during the daytime in LA, so it's like just super bright, super clear, very crisp, and so to have it on this remaster, you can really see that shining through. We have a slipcase here to talk about the physical kind of presentation of the release. So this is this amazing artwork from Kung Fu Bob, which I absolutely love, and then here we just have some pictures from the movie and the description and the bonus features listed. And then pop this bad boy out, and I have kept, there is reversible artwork, I have kept the Kung Fu Bob art here because it's just so damn good. How could you not? And it's the same thing on the back. And then you have the disc with that artwork again with the focus on the Jet Li bit, and you can see the whole kind of thing here. And then the reversible cover art is, why don't I just pull it out instead of trying to, can you see what that is? Yeah, it's like this kind of hero shot of Jet Li, but like it's just a little bit odd because like the way he looks, to me he looks like a soldier. The way that it's like this, like why is he wearing a scarf? I don't remember him wearing a scarf in the movie, and like I don't know, it just doesn't really, to me that is not representative of this film at all. So it's just kind of an odd choice that would be the poster, and I just don't like it as much as the Kung Fu Bob one, and so I have left it reversed. And then we have there's lobby cards in here, so I can show you those really quickly. Here we have the man himself. I guess these are more like postcards to lobby cards, right? Since they're in a Blu-ray, not sitting in the lobby of a movie theater somewhere. And there's this. And then on the backs of these, oh, look, there's Yuen Wah. There's Mr. Jerry Trimble. Look at that. I mean, even in the picture, you can see the mullet. It's unbelievable. Some of the best moments on this whole Blu-ray, this is from the end of the film you'll recognize. And this is some credits and stuff. Or Arna Venomous, he does a commentary on here with Mike Leader. His comments on the mullet, I wrote down 2 quotes that are pretty amazing. And I will tell them to you in a minute. And then, look, there's a poster. Yes. So if I ever have the space, I'm going to get this framed along with the other Kung Fu Bob posters I have and put them up in my... I think I should have like a Kung Fu kind of like a den or like a lair of some kind. And then... I can put all my stuff in there. So to talk about the bonus features, there's 2 commentary tracks on here, and there's about an hour worth of interviews. So the movie's 90 minutes, so that's 3 hours worth of commentaries. Interviews is 4 hours. So with the movie, it's 5.5 hours worth of material on here. And I am extremely, extremely happy with, I have to point this out, like I can't get my hair to stop being ridiculous right now. It's the COVID thing, right? Everyone's hair is just out of control because people who typically deal with people's hair are not in the United States, at least, right? And I guess especially in LA. I'm so happy with this release because this is one of those movies that I think like it's not as well known. It doesn't have as much of a reputation, and so to be able to revisit it with all these bonus features is really, really cool. So I'll talk to you about the interviews first, and then about the commentary tracks. So interviews on here there's 2 interviews with John Kreng, who I didn't really know that much about honestly before this, and I'll talk about his interviews are really good. Crystal Kwok is on here, who's in the movie, like I said. There's an interview with Yuen Wah. And I think that's it, right? It's the 2 John Kreng interviews, Crystal Kwok, Yuen Wah, yeah, and then the original trailer and the English language trailer are both on here. So John Kreng is his story is really interesting. So he's like an action director, a stunt performer. He's been a second unit director. He's written a book on action directing and stunt coordinating and fight coordinating and stuff like that. And his story is really, really interesting. So he was the son of a Cambodian ambassador to the United States, but his dad passed away when he was really young, and his mom decided to stay in the U.S. And when he was a teenager, he was getting bullied a lot because it was like the tail end of the Vietnam War. And obviously, being from Cambodia, he's from Southeast Asia. And so he became like obsessed with martial arts films. And he said that he saw Enter the Dragon 60 times in the theater. And he saw Snake and Eagle's Shadow like 30 or 35 times in theaters. And he said that the theaters he would go to were just absolutely packed. And people would be like sitting in the aisles and like cheering and going crazy for these movies. And being a kid from Southeast Asia and seeing people like Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan being heroes, he had more of a sense of self-worth because he didn't have to accept the version of him that was given to him by the people who were being bullied. He could see, these Asian superstars on the screen doing these amazing heroic things and realizing that he can be part of that tradition and everything. And so he started doing martial arts, and he became like kind of a competitive martial artist. And then he went to college and he fell in love with stand-up comedy, and he became a stand-up comedian, ended up in LA, and met someone who was producing this film. And he says in one interview that it was Roberta Chow, who's Raymond Chow's daughter. And he says in another interview it was the other producer. So I'm not sure which one he met first. He probably knew them both. But at some point they found out that, or he wanted to get involved in this movie. Maybe he knew, because he knew who Tsui Hark was at this point. Tsui Hark directed this, and I think he knew who Jet Li was. And maybe he wanted to be involved, or they told him about it, or, oh no, here's what the story is. They offered him 2 projects because he said, I'm a stand-up comedian, but I also am a martial artist. And they're like, oh, well, we're doing Ninja Turtles right now, and we're also doing this movie with Jet Li and Tsui Hark. Which one do you want to do? And he picked the Jet Li and Tsui Hark one. They're like, you sure you don't want to do Ninja Turtles? And he's like, yeah, definitely. I want to work with Jet Li. And so it's just so cool to hear him talk about working with Jet Li. And in one of the interviews, he's actually going to the locations in LA and being like, oh, we shot that over there and we shot that part over here. And he was almost run over by a car at some point because like there's a scene where Jet Li beats all these gang members up. He's playing one of the gang members, and they're all like reversing away in their cars, and he hadn't quite gotten to the car, but the driver was reversing, and he like basically had to run at the speed of the car so that the door didn't like smash him and he didn't get dragged under and get killed. But one of my favorite stories that he tells was that he's a bigger guy than Jet Li. So if Jet Li's like 5'6", and he weighs like 140 pounds or something. He's very small, right? So he was going to kick John Kreng in the head, and he was like, yeah, okay, he's kind of small, and I'm a lot bigger than him, and it should be okay, right? Like, yeah, I think I can take it. And he said he had never been hit that hard by a human being in his life, and the whole side of his body went numb. He couldn't feel anything, like he thought he was going to die. Like, it was like being kicked by a mule. So it's a fun story. But he tells a lot of really cool stories about being on the sets of these movies and what he learned from them, and how there was a Chinese crew, like a Hong Kong crew, and then there was the American crew, because the film was shot in LA, but Tsui Hark brought people over with him. And so to the American crew, they had no idea who Jet Li was, because this was before he was big over here, and they didn't know who Tsui Hark was. And like, so John Kreng, being this person who was American but understood how awesome these people were and their level of celebrity, was able to kind of be this bridge between the two halves of the film crew. So that is just super cool. It's 2 interviews, like 30 minutes worth of interviews with him. So then you have Crystal Kwok. So Crystal Kwok is in the film, and her story is that she's from San Francisco, and I think she won like a beauty pageant or something, and she was able to go to Hong Kong, and she was in a couple Jackie Chan movies. She was in Dragons Forever, and she was in Police Story 2, and then she got this movie. And she's really interesting to hear talk about the movie and her career. She kind of talks about Tsui Hark and how like she was in college at the time, so she would show him her like 8mm student films, and he would like critique them for her and stuff. And like they had like it seems like they had like a really good relationship in some ways, but she also said he's very difficult to work with because he really wants what he wants, and he knows exactly what he wants, and he's not great at communicating what he wants, so he just kind of wants you to get it without telling you exactly what it is. And like she said, it was a little bit difficult to deal with him on set, but she really liked him too, and as an artist and a friend and stuff like that. She also talks about how she she spoke English and she spoke Cantonese, and so like she was as kind of like John Kreng, she was this kind of bridge between the worlds on the set. She talks about Jet Li and how he kind of like kept to himself, and like he would speak to her in Mandarin, she would speak to him in Cantonese, they would understand each other. And but it's also really interesting because she goes into her own career and how she didn't really think that she was an actor, and she kind of got out of acting. She wanted to do behind the camera stuff, but she was very outspoken, and people aren't used to that in the Hong Kong film industry, especially from a woman and like a young woman. And so she kind of made some enemies, and it was hard for her to kind of get her footing in the industry. And then she was finally able to make a movie in 1999. She made a film called The Mistress, which I have not seen, which I've actually kind of been looking for since I heard about it. It sounds really interesting, but I have yet to been able to find a copy of it. But it's just a really interesting interview about her role in the industry, her position, what it's like to have grown up in America, but to be doing stuff in Hong Kong, coming back to America, in front of the camera, behind the camera. It's really, really fascinating interview. And then the Yuen Wah interview is he just seems like a really laid back, really nice guy. He talks about how he started working with Bruce Lee. He tells stories about working with Sammo and Jackie. And then he talks about this movie, and there's kind of a lot of talk about how Jet Li and Jerry Trimble, who plays the villain, who's the mullet man, didn't really like each other. And according to Yuen Wah, what actually happened was, obviously they had problems communicating because Jet Li didn't speak English really, and Jerry Trimble did not speak Mandarin or Cantonese. But what Yuen Wah says is that the main issue they had is that they have very different styles, right? Because Jerry Trimble's like Taekwondo and kickboxing, and Jet Li is wushu, and they ended up, because of the way that their styles are so different, it was inevitable that they hit each other a bunch of times during the filming of the movie. And according to Yuen Wah, Jet Li wouldn't say sorry. He would accidentally hit the guy and then be like, okay, fine, let's reset, let's do it again. He was kind of like very focused and quiet, and like from what other people say on the interviews about people who know Jet Li, he's very, they call him like a Zen master. Like he's very kind of quiet and mischievous and kind of elusive, right? And so Jerry Trimble would get mad and be offended that Jet Li was not like apologetic for having hit him, and like like Jet Li would get annoyed that Jerry Trimble would hit him hard, and then they'd have to it's like stuff like that. So pretty cool interview. And then you have the audio commentary. So first we have Mike Leader and Arna Venema, who I love, and actually plugging myself, I interviewed Arna last week and it was amazing, and that will be up very soon hopefully. And he's an awesome guy, and his knowledge of Hong Kong movies is just insane. It was really awesome to talk to him. So their audio commentaries are also always awesome. And the reason they're always awesome is that they both live and work in Hong Kong. And so they can tell you so much about, like, they talk about how you get permits for Hong Kong films, and like how permits kind of work there, and like they don't have unions in Hong Kong. And Tsui Hark, came to the U.S. and the film unions are really, really strong in the U.S. and how there was like tension on the set, and like all the actors they know, and they don't just know, like they know them personally. They tell stories about meeting Tsui Hark. Like Arna does this really cool little breakdown of like, he's like, his lens choice here is really cool. He's using this type of angle. He's always kind of doing this with his camera movement adds this to the movie, like, because he's a filmmaker, so he really breaks down that kind of stuff. And Mike has so many stories about all of these guys, and they do some analysis. So my two favorite quotes about the mullet are, the mullet is basically a cape at this point because it's so long. And these are both from Arna. And if that mullet were alive today, it would have a Facebook page. So and they point out, like, parts in the movie where, like, there's a bit in the movie where a bus driver gets shot, and when we first see the bus, Arna's like, you can see the blood's already on the window of the bus, right? Like, so they either shot this after, or they didn't clean it off, or like, like little inconsistencies like that. It's a really cool, really fun, extremely knowledgeable commentary track. And then we have the first ever audio commentary track from Kung Fu Bob, who did this right here, who also is, I think, the co-founder and co-director or co-runner, or whatever you want to call it, of 36 Styles, the clothing company. And then also, I think, the forum, the Kung Fu movie, martial arts, Hong Kong cinema forum, 36. Is it called 36 Styles? It's 36 something, and it's like a really well-known, if you know forums, it's like a really well-known, it's probably like the biggest martial arts movie forum in the English language, at least. And I've definitely been on there before. And and his audio commentary is, I would say he knocked it out of the park for his first one. It's really fantastic. There's so much information in it that it's really incredible, like biographical information about all the actors, and not just like, like you'll see these commentaries where it's like, oh, that, that actor was in this movie and that movie, and that's kind of like the end of it. You know what I mean? Like, I learned more about Jet Li from his commentary than I ever knew before. I learned a lot about Crystal Kwok even after having watched her interview. I learned a lot about Yuen Wah. He talks about kind of like the evolution of Peking opera and how those guys found their way into movies. One of the things I loved about this, actually, there's a scene where there's like a movie poster in the background because there's like a video store on the street where some of the movie takes place, and Kung Fu Bob knows the movie. He's like, oh, that movie came out this year and these people were in it and they were also in these other movies, and like Billy Blanks is in this movie. He's in like 2 shots. So like, I don't know if he was supposed to be in more fight scenes and they either didn't film them or they cut them out or something. It's weird that Billy Blanks would be in a movie in this time period when he was making movies. And he's just kind of there in like 1 shot, right? But he talks about that, and like he kind of conjectures about like, oh, well, if you notice in this part of the scene, this guy is totally fine, but then in a later part of the scene, he's holding his nose like he broke it, and like probably some footage was cut out where he got in a fight, and like he has a very, very keen eye for like he's watched some of these scenes in slow motion. And it's like, when Jerry Chimbal does this dive through the door, you can see that he's only wearing pads on his arm, so it probably actually hurt when he landed. And like, it's really, really detailed, really incredible information, and someone who obviously really loves this movie, but then also isn't afraid to critique it, because he talks about a lot of the problem that people have with this movie is they think there's a lot of gaps in logic in it. I'll talk about that in my other video, but he points out that like, why are they in this location at this time, or how did they get there, and why is this shot there, and like he talks about how he thinks the editing is kind of sloppy and stuff like that. That's enough. I'm gonna get out of your hair. My name is Will. Thank you so much for watching. If you're subscribed, thank you so much for that. If you're not and you feel like it, that would be awesome. Yay, thank you. You made it this far into the video. It's the master. It's the 88 Films release. Link in the description to where you can find this. We will see you next time.